Welcome in this new edition of the Read ID webinar series. My name is Wil Jansen and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Read ID. Over a year ago, we started this series of webinars forced by the pandemic, of course. Now we are fortunately moving towards the end of that, but we will continue this series of webinars as we received very positive responses from you, our audience. So if you have special requests for topics or guests or suggestions, please let us know. You can reach us through our website, www.readid.com, or through your contact person. And please let us know if you have any ideas or suggestions on that. Talking about the website, we completely renewed our website with a new look and feel, much more content, much more cases, and we appreciate your comments on that as well. The theme of today is verification in real estate and mortgages. With house sales and house prices going sky high, this is a very important field to create trust in. And we have two guests here today that I would like to introduce to you. We will be joined by Jack Bidgood from London. Jack is the Managing Director of Thirdfort, providing identity verification for lawyers and conveyancers. Welcome, Jack.
Hi there. Thanks a lot for having me.
We'll talk further with you in the second part of the session. So see you later. And our first guest here is at the table is Justus Damman. He is Manager Digital of Florius, and he's responsible for the digital channels of Florius, Money and ABN AMRO Intermediary sales. He has been working for ABN AMRO for 16 years already now. And in the Dutch mortgage market, Florius is one of the most innovative players. They have won several prizes on mortgages, both from clients as well as from independent advisors. And within ABN AMRO, Justus started the implementation of Read ID in combination with our iProof partner. Welcome, Justus. Great to have you here.
Nice to be here.
In real life, at the table, something that doesn't happen that often anymore, I guess. To start off with, we mentioned quite a few names in the introduction. So the ABN AMRO, Florius, Money. Yeah. How are they related? What's the constellation?
The sales of mortgages is centered within the mortgages department, and we have several branches branded. We've got Money, which started as only internet mortgages. Then it grew to also Intermediary. Florius is the new name of formerly Bouwfonds. But when we were sold by ABN AMRO, bought by ABN AMRO, we had to use a new name. So that was Florius. And ABN AMRO has its own branches and also sells via the independent intermediary. Technically, that all comes in one platform, and that's the digital platform we're talking about. So that's for us, it's just three brands, but we combine technique, of course.
Okay, so in the end, the processes and the compliance rules are all the same.
Yeah.
The channels towards the market are different.
Yeah.
Okay. The use of Read ID is for mortgage applications.
Yeah.
What kind of identity verification is actually needed in this process, and how does that process work?
Well, it's we raised the bar for identity. Normally, it was not a big thing when you apply for a mortgage, because you always go to the notary, and over there you hand over your passport. You have all the checks done, and when that's finished, then the money transfers. So we had no risk on that part. But things are changing, and now we have to identify even before we make the offer to the client. So that we tried all kinds of things. in the Dutch market is really normal, but that's not a real identification or verification. So we had to look for something which is stronger and very early in the process. So that's when Read ID came together with iProof. Came as a solution, because that you can do that when it isn't even your client yet. You can already do the identification.
Yeah. So basically, it isn't the case that the legislation changed, but it's more that the bar is raised to what level you have to do your KYC.
It's also legislations, compliances. It's even more and more. And now we have Know Your Client, of course. So there's also we also have got work to do on that part, because a lot of clients came to us, and now we have to prove all the identification. So it changed, and the bar went up high. So we have work to do.
Yeah. You already mentioned the role of the notary in the end of the process. Is there some kind of collaboration between the notary? Because, well, the notary is kind of known also for its conservatism in this field.
Of course, it is part of our process, because when you buy a house, you always have to go to the notary. There are some cases where we work together, but not on this part, because we have to do the identification far before the client goes to the notary.
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
You have your own responsibilities, and you have to take care of those responsibilities. That's clear. You use our out-of-the-box app, Really Ready. So that's an app that we've built that's then branded with your look and feel and your customer branding. Why did you choose for that type of implementation? You could have also implemented your own app, of course, as the ABN AMRO internet banking app.
It is a first step. But we also saw some market research where the clients liked to use an app for identification, because it's not of any use after that. It's okay to throw it away. So well, then it's a really good start to use the out-of-the-box app. We are looking forward to use it for Florius as well, and I'm not sure whether I will make the same choice then. But for now, it was the fastest and the best solution. Because when we have to use the Money app, within the Money app, that's mainly payments. And now it's even gone, because the payments part of Money stopped. So we don't have a separate mortgage app. So, but for Florius we do, and then it's a real opportunity to even enhance the use of the app, because then you can do identification, verification, maybe signing. Well, then you can start building from there. So for the Florius implementations, I think we were considering to use the app itself and then use APIs.
Yeah, as a growth model.
Yeah.
You said speed was one of the things you mentioned to choose for Really. Can you tell a bit about the implementation process? Because because technology is easy, but
well, that was the technology part was the easy part. The most difficult part was to tell the story and explain the work to all the different committees within the bank, because it is identification, verifications, it is privacy information. It's you got Innovator, Read ID, iProof, because that's the combination. So a lot of work went. Most of the work went in getting to all the committees to explain how we want it, whether it's safe, all things of that. And it's a difficult story to tell, because people know EDIN, because they did it. They know a passport which you can sign. I've seen the original one, and that's all easy to explain. And when you explain this process, especially the iProof part, it takes time. And when a lot of committees don't exactly understand what they say, what you're trying to achieve, you don't get a okay.
So basically you changed an existing process that went through a branch office where people would see each other, would sign off. You make that digital, and in that transition into digital, a lot of new concepts basically come. Not only new partners, but it's a whole new way of thinking.
Yeah, new way of thinking, new concepts. Then you get a concept which seems to be a bit of the same, but when you look at it really well, like OCR, well, it is definitely not the same. But when you go to an identification process, it's also the thing you can do with a passport, but it's different.
Yeah.
So it are non-technical people who have to approve, and it's quite technical.
Yeah. When did they start to trust the new solution or the new technology? What was the key element in that?
Well, that's a good question. I think the demo helped. We showed them several test cases. And we had a little process where we have the device binding, and when they saw it happening, they still got questions, but then it made sense. Yeah. So that helped. But it's not that easy to do that really early in the process. And it depends. The technical part needs something different than the compliance or the legal. So it depends. And within a big bank, there are several solutions for several problems. There are a lot of solutions for one or two problems. When you combine it, it's identification and verification. Yeah. Then why don't you use it? Why don't you? Yeah.
So really telling the story, convincing people, trusting, making sure that they can trust in you, the new setup. And
afterwards, they told me this was really good. We hung on to the solution. So it is really working really nice.
So that in the end, everything came okay. Yeah. You could have chosen for many different types of identity verification solutions. You came up with Reader the NMC-based identity verification. Why?
Mainly because it's fully digital. I see a lot of identification and verification, but the verification is calling, video call, and always needs some kind of human interface. And what I really liked was non-human interface. So it's 24/7. It will develop, of course. So, but it's mainly because it's completely without human interface, so we can proceed immediately. Because it's not that human interface is not good, but it's a stop in your process. Yeah. And when it's fully technical, you can always immediately continue in your process.
Yeah, so it's instant identity verification in any case, no fallout.
That was the main reason.
There was some question coming from the audience already. It's on the link to maybe the web process. So some of these processes start online on a website. Did you have any concerns to ask the people, or your customers, to install that app, and how did they react?
I had a concern, of course, before we started, but we experienced that it's not really a problem. But well, in our in our advances, they want a mortgage, so it's really easy for us to ask something like that, because that's a step to do for a mortgage. And I don't know whether you applied for a mortgage yourself. There are a lot of steps to ask, and it's like documents, and it's okay. Let's get it over with, so I can start rebuilding the house. But well, it's a question. We do it. It's online. It starts, and they choose it. But we also have people who can help them. Yeah. So it's not, and it's not really a big deal. We have very little people who just don't want to do it. Yeah.
So there's a big incentive for them to do it, and that incentive is good enough to get them through the process. Yeah. Do you ever? When did you launch? It's now 2 months.
Well, we first had the pilot period, but the official is since February.
So you already have some experiences. Can you tell a bit about the feedback that you get from customers, or from the channel?
Easy. I didn't know my passport had a chip. Yeah. And mainly a really high success percentage. I told you we have. I've got the number this morning. It's got 96% success percentage, because that was my main fear. Because the alternative is really sending someone to look at the passport. Yeah. So that's quite expensive. But that's hardly any case. The cases go wrong now. It's like I don't have a mobile phone, or it's more like that.
So 96% of the people that start the process end it successfully with both the checking the passport as well as the facial verification. Yeah. That's really high.
It's higher than I expected. Okay.
Well, it's always great to kind of overachieve.
It can always be higher, of course. Okay. So don't stop developing.
No, we keep working towards that 100%. That's for sure. But 96%, that's really great achievement, and it also kind of shows that the communication that you have around the process and the app it's good that so trust is generated.
Definitely, but you also got some advisor on the phone, so that helps as well.
Okay, yeah,
because they know exactly what the client is going through, like installing the app and exactly all the steps. So when it's a bit more difficult, they are helped. And there's always, in a lot of times, it's 2 times the same process, because in a lot of mortgages, it's 2 people.
Yeah, 2 people.
So that the second one is easy.
Yeah, they sit next to each other. I can imagine you sitting on the couch.
Yes.
You try it first, and then, if you can do it, I can do it as well.
Yes, that's
maybe they even use the same phone, because it's independent of the phone.
Yeah,
of course. It's just,
it's different face probably, but...
Yeah, different, yeah, okay. You mentioned you have those different brands for the mortgages, and some of them also are intermediary dependent. How did the intermediaries react to this, or how do they see it? How do they encounter this part of the identification?
Well, they don't use it yet, because we do it for the money mortgages at this moment. We are working on a implementation and more thinking out the process for the intermediaries. I got 2 different. The COVID helped, because they had to do a lot of things via laptops, where normally they were on the same desk. So digital wise, that helped a lot. For them, and that's the difficulty we're facing now. They would like one solution for ABN AMRO, Florius, Money, Aegon. They want. And that's a bit more difficult to implement. So what we're looking at now is how can we make it really easy, because when they apply for a Florius mortgage, for instance, the client must do it. It must be so easy so they can do it themselves. Yep. Because for the intermediary, it's like, well, they got 6 or 7 technologies maybe in a while. And you don't want it to be, well, let's not apply for a mortgage because it's Florius, because it's difficult to identify. But we don't have our people on the phone with the clients. So that's why we are really looking at all the feedback we're getting now, because that must be implemented in the process where we're not there.
Yeah. So the customer journey must be really, really smooth, and you're now learning how to create the smoothest customer journey. Yeah.
Look, otherwise they won't use it, and then it's really a problem, because they don't apply for a Florius mortgage, for instance.
Yeah. So the main reason for using it, or if not using it, would be ease of use, or the fact that identity verification should be top-notch, should be as secure as possible, is of lesser importance, it seems.
For them,
to the intermediaries, or to the...
I don't know whether it's true when you look at the legal-wise, because they give advice and they also provide a product. So in some, I think in some way they also must identify who they give their advice product to. But of course, the identification for us is just one of the steps they have to take. It's not really important to them. Yeah. But it can't be a burden. It's just like smooth.
We have a question from Ronald here, also in the audience. He's still curious. Well, he said the 96% is quite high, but what are typical examples that you see in those 4%, or what are things that failed, or where should we improve maybe?
Mainly, it's some technical hiccup, and not willing to try again. Old phones. I think not that much old passports anymore. I haven't heard that.
Because your customers are primarily Dutch, I think, isn't
Dutch,
it?
yeah.
So it's a Dutch market, and we have full penetration of, chip passports.
That's not it. It's more like it's not working.
Yeah, so
give up.
Yeah, give up and go to your intermediary, or to somebody to help you out with. Yeah, you always have some part that
I tried twice and it's enough.
Yeah.
And we still would like to apply for a mortgage, so then we go to Plan B.
Yeah. Speaking of coverage and maybe international expansion, by now we can read passports from over 150 countries, and of course the problem of non-working phones slowly moves out with everything from iPhone 7 onwards works.
Yeah. When we started, the iPhone wasn't there yet, but luckily enough, when we really implemented, also the iPhone was on board.
Yes, sometimes changes of that time is on your side, and that is the case as well. We have another question here from the audience, and say, well, ABN AMRO is a bank, also a mortgage provider. What are typical differences in the KYC process of applying for a mortgage, or, for example, opening a bank account, or are they similar?
They're similar.
They're similar.
Yeah, they're similar. Maybe the process is a bit different because when you go to a branch office, of course, you start another process, then you go to an intermediary. But all the rest is all the same.
Oh, okay.
It's just not easier.
Yeah, more difficult. Speaking of bank accounts, you now have, you already explained, you now have for Florius, you have really ready, maybe moving into...
Money, yeah.
For Manu,
Yep.
moving into maybe native implementation or the SDK-based implementations in your app. What kind of use cases do you foresee maybe in the near future? Or do you have plans to expand other use cases?
Well, when we implement for Florius and they use it, I will be really, really happy. When we discuss the subject, you also get the signing part. That's what we see with then you get identification verification, but that's really connected to signing.
Yeah.
So when we look at use cases, we have CDD project as due diligence, and then you have to identify. You have to look whether they're blacklisted, and also that's really strong identification. And when you use the identification verification from ReadID, and you add signing to it, because then you know who is signing. Then you get a real nice package, whether it's online or it's a web or app, I don't know. But especially the signing part is very often becomes part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And whether it's a new mortgage or the change on a mortgage or something, then and maybe re-identification. I don't know. I'm not sure whether. One time will be enough, because you see a lot of customer checkups.
Yeah. Also in the mortgage part, or primarily in the banking on the banking side?
All finance industry,
yeah.
Knowing your client, whatever it is.
App reactivation, things like that.
Maybe
we see a lot now.
So that's the part. But when in the foreseeable future, I mainly think of the signing part, signing your mortgage, signing your change, signing you agree to something, because when you go in an app or online, it's always the question who is on the other side.
Yeah, so. Definitely. Any new questions? I think there was a question by Paul. We've been talking about especially passports, but Paul asked, do you also support the use of driving licenses in this case?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Because in fact,
it is the same, yeah.
Yeah, security-wise and identity-wise, it's the same.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Good question. I don't even know.
Let's
get back to that.
Let's open a mortgage apply for a mortgage after this.
It's a while ago,
but
and
then
I used our own advice, so I'm not sure.
Okay. And speaking of driving licenses, Dutch driving license and a few others, they are chipped, but many driving licenses in other countries are not chipped yet.
Only Dutch-only passport as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Not for.
That's also for compliance reasons that you restrict. Yeah. So not always technology is not always the restricting factor, not in the implementation, not in the broadness of the use case.
I think the technology was like, you support all the passports, and how can we limit it to the Dutch passport?
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
Yeah, so the business rules surrounding it. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you, Justus, for your explanation and the clear reasons on how it worked to implement ReadID Ready and the customer feedback. Before we move to our next guest, we have some interesting news that we would like to share with you.
Mooi beeld.
Effective 1st of June 2021, the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority, FINMA, adapted its due diligence requirements in connection to client onboarding. And basically, to identify persons online, it is now permitted to scan the chips in identity documents instead of doing a bank transfer. And that's really great news for us. It fits within the growing adoption of NFC as an essential component in digital identity verification, as Justus also explained, and that we see happening worldwide. It's also happening in the UK with Her Majesty's Land Registry that published its new standard for identity verification, including chip reading and verification in March. So that was a similar development. The use of NFC should enable companies to offer smooth onboarding for clients, as we quote FINMA. We definitely agree with this standpoint. It's reflected in many of the positive feedback we get from users in other use cases. Second point of news is that the security of Ready builds upon, as mentioned, the highly secure chips in the identity documents. Protection of your personal information, of course, is very important. For example, you don't want somebody queuing behind you in the supermarket to be able to scan your passport with some kind of reader. Because of that, there are two important access control mechanisms for the chips. You have basic access control, and nowadays you also have password authenticated connection establishment, long term, PACE for short. Basic access control is the oldest protocol, and in order to access the chip using BAC, you only need to know the document number, the date of birth, and the expiry date in the document. And they can be found in the machine-readable zone in your identity document. That's also the reason why in the first step, we'll see that later on also with Thirdfort, you first have to scan that or read that machine-readable zone to get the key to the chip. The newer protocol is Password Authenticated Connection Establishment, or PACE. It uses more modern cryptography to provide an increased level of security. Nowadays, the European Union mandates the implementation of PACE by its member states, and also in newly issued travel documents. What we see now happening also in our analytics and in our data is that many countries are dropping support for basic access control, causing problems with some solutions that do not support PACE. We're very pleased to announce that we support both PAC and PACE on iPhones, iOS and Android in all our software. So our solution is definitely future-proof. You can read more about that in one of our blog posts on the website. And when choosing technologies, make sure that your provider supports both BAC and PACE. Otherwise, you can run into loss of conversion. So after this great news, let us now move to our second guest, Jack Bitgood of Thirdfort. Welcome, Jack. Welcome back again.
Hi there.
Hi. Jack is co-founder and managing director of Thirdfort. Thirdfort recently started to use ReadID to comply with the so-called safe harbor checks in the UK. We'll talk about that later on. Before starting Thirdfort 4 years ago, Jack worked at Barclays Investment Bank, and he studied economics at Durham University. Jack joins us from London, from the UK, so welcome. Jack, many of us don't know Thirdfort or don't know Thirdfort yet. Can you explain a bit more about what you do at Thirdfort and what kind of services you deliver?
Of course, yes. So we're a startup that was founded by myself and my co-founder Ollie just over 3 years ago. So we are relatively young in terms of how long we've been around as a business. What we look to do is transform the way that people buy and sell property in the UK. You're very much focused on the residential UK market for now. We're particularly focused on the legal part of the process, which, like in many countries, is very, very slow and difficult to wade through as an individual that isn't familiar with the process, trying to, maybe a first-time buyer or somebody that's been through the process before. So we're really focused on trying to make that element of the buying and selling journey as easy as possible, and in particular, focusing in on the problems of fraud and money laundering within the sector that are still growing at a very fast pace in the UK.
Yeah. Can you explain a bit more on why you started, or why did you see a need for Thirdfort and its services?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So we started the business, just over 3 years ago, and the initial kind of trigger for us to look at this sector was a friend of ours that got defrauded out of £25,000. They were a first-time buyer trying to, get on the property ladder for the first time, and they sent this money effectively to what they thought was their law firm. Emails were hacked and misdirected, and that money went missing, and they never got that back. Terrible, terrible thing that happened to this close friend of ours. So that got us thinking. Well, first of all, how is that possible? How in this modern world, when he had a lawyer, a proper lawyer, was he able to lose that amount of money and also not have any form of insurance? And he couldn't go ahead and buy the house, right? He had to go back to the drawing board and save some more money to buy it. That got us thinking, how the hell is that possible in this day and age? And then second of all, how is it possible that everybody you speak to, especially in the UK, but it's a problem globally, has a terrible time when they're trying to transact property? You never meet somebody that says, yes, I just bought a house the other day. It was really fast. It was really smooth. It was really enjoyable. And there were no problems on the journey. That never happens. And I think that there's so many reasons for that. But the more that we looked at the sector, the more we saw the legal process in particular is very, very difficult and disjointed. And one of the root causes of that problem is a lack of software and a lack of proper innovation on the software side to not only service the consumers, so the poor guy and girl who are trying to buy a house for the first time potentially, and they're also trying to raise kids, or they're trying to work their normal day job. They're stressed out. They just want to do this thing as fast and as simply as possible. But then on the other side, it's the property professionals involved, the lawyers, the estate agents, the mortgage brokers, who are all struggling with a huge amount of admin, who are all struggling with disjointed technology that doesn't work very well. But also they're being hit by property fraud and by major money laundering threats, which especially with high value London property is one of the big kind of financial threats to the UK economy. So that's really kind of our journey into this. The more we realised that there was this opportunity, and the more we realised it was a very greenfield site. The providers in the UK often are quite legacy and don't service the needs of consumers or the professionals.
So we really try to move the traditional conservative, non-digital real estate or conveyances sector, move them into that digital age with all the advantages thereof.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the things, one of the core threats and kind of challenges for our business has always been that, the legal industry in particular is very risk averse, and they want to make sure that when technology is adopted, it's done in a slow, managed way so that risk is always mitigated. But one of the things that's definitely accelerated that, without a doubt, is COVID and the pandemic, where all of these businesses have had to work online and adopt technology at a much, much faster rate than they otherwise would have done. So that's definitely driven a lot of the recent growth that we've seen in the business, because all of the lawyers in particular are now having to onboard clients remotely. Yeah.
So your customers are the lawyers and the conveyancers, and they use your identity verification solutions with their clients.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a B2B sales model for us. The lawyers are who we're focused on selling it to. However, the end consumer that uses the app is clearly a key user for us that we are always trying to optimize the journey for.
Yeah, maybe to get a bit of a feeling of that customer journey and how that works out to your audience, could you show us how your app works?
Yeah, of course. Let me share a screen here, and I can show you the overall journey. Hopefully you can see my screen working here. Let me go let me bring it up full screen. So to introduce the app, it's an app that allows the consumer to do multiple things, providing the documentation and the evidence and filling in forms that are all required when you're going through the legal process. I've focused here on just the ID checking task, which is what we use Read ID for. in combination with iProve, as you've already heard. We're not the only ones that use the two in combination. We asked hang on, let me go back and press play. So we introduced the ID check, asking them to use a passport. We do only accept passports in this journey rather than driving licenses as well. We then use the Read ID SDK, and we use Viz Capture, which is a new Read ID feature that captures the actual image of the passport as well as reading the NFC chip. So this is the Viz Capture in action, and then we move into the NFC scanning, which some of you may be familiar with. Overall, it takes a few seconds to read the chip and to verify it, which you can see it doing now, reading the photograph and then verifying the validity of it. Then we move into the iProve journey, so the face scanning element of it. Here's a quick iProve intro on how it works, and then this is the scanning demo here, which again just takes a few seconds to complete. And that brings us to the end of the journey. So, incredibly simple example there of the technology in action. But overall, we have a number of different task flows effectively within the app. That's just one of them that is very focused on the ID journey.
Yeah, clear. Yeah, and some things are seemingly simple, but it's just a case of making sure that the complexity is taken away from your audience. As I guess similar to with Justice, you have a non-technical audience in principle, both in the B2B setting as in the B2B2C setting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest challenges for us is getting that journey right in the app for the consumer. All of the same challenges that I'm sure any of your customers have. But we also want to make sure that it's an out-of-the-box solution for the lawyers. So it's an app that works with almost no integration from their side. Yeah.
I saw on your also on your website you do a lot of I'd say kind of education towards your audience on how that works. Was that really needed? So what kind of things did you feel you had to explain, or what kind of questions did you get when you introduced this?
Yeah, of course. So when an individual is asked to use our app, it's an unusual journey, and it's probably similar to the app you guys have just been speaking about, that nobody really wants to download the app. And it's not a fun app, it's not a game, it's not a rewarding app necessarily to do. It's a very process-driven app, but what it does allow them to do is, in our case, buy a house or maybe get a mortgage or whatever that is. So we have to remember that in the user journey and the experience, and what we say to people on the way in. So we spend a lot of time educating people about why the app does what it does, why we ask for what is a lot of very personal information, and why they have to go through this journey. And if they don't, effectively, they're not going to be able to buy the house. So it's trying to educate them and hold their hand through it. The other elements, one of the other task flows, for example, in our app is using open banking to gather access to gather banking data directly from the bank. Again, a hugely different modern way of doing things. But again, it's all about their data, right? People are increasingly concerned about where their data is and who is getting access to it. So that's a large part of the education piece as well.
Yeah. So really, by creating trust, by explaining what's going on, why it's needed, and so on, and what the technology is. Okay. In the beginning, we already mentioned the Her Majesty's Land Registry digital ID standard. What is that standard? What does it require from you as Thirdfort?
Sure. So this is a hugely exciting piece of regulation for us and probably potentially others on this call. The Land Registry in the UK has, it's not a regulator, but it steps into this kind of position of authority whereby it can lead the industry and to a certain extent kind of set the rules. They've been going through a multi-year journey of bringing the whole organisation into the modern world and trying to lead from the front in terms of modernising the home buying process in the UK. One of their latest kind of achievements is this focus on digital ID. after several years really of kind of engagement with the industry, they've announced what they call the digital ID standard. And what it says is that lawyers, if they tick 4 boxes in total, they meet the digital ID standard, which comes with a kind of a safe harbor carve out. This safe harbor basically says that if a lawyer asks the registry to change a title, and then it turns out that it was a fraudulent transaction, in a normal circumstance, the Land Registry, under the Land Registry Act, is able to basically seek recourse, is able to sue the law firm for this fraudulent case because it and blames the lawyer for it. What this safe harbor says is that if you use and meet our digital standard and it still ends up being a fraudulent case, then we will not sue you. You are protected by this safe harbor. So it's a really powerful rule for the lawyers involved here. If they're able to meet this standard, then it reduces this, significantly limits the risk of potentially one of these fraudulent transactions coming to their door. And I won't go into all of the 4 requirements, but the key ones that are relevant here is the first requirement basically means that they have to use NFC technology to read a chip on a passport or driving license, and they also have to validate the signing key and the digital signatures. So check that not only that the NFC chip is there, but also validate that the information on it is correct. So that's the core implication for us as a provider and for many providers out there that are looking to meet this digital ID standard. I should say that prior to this, we launched an ID checking product more than 2 years ago that was not NFC compliant. So that was the shift then to partnering with Read ID to extend the functionality so that we now do meet the NFC kind of bar that's required for the standard.
So you moved, or you added to optical verification, you added the additional level of the possibility of NFC-based verification. And so it even goes a bit beyond, for example, the FINMA example that I gave, that they actually require you to use NFC in order to become part of that safe harbor.
That's exactly right. So you don't have to use this technology if you're an old school law firm that doesn't want to do it. That's absolutely fine, but you are just taking on more risk as that lawyer. Yeah. So it's not a standard. I think one day the Land Registry will make everybody do this, but for now, this is new technology, in their eyes, and they're very strongly incentivizing people to use it, but they're not requiring it for everybody.
Yeah, so I can imagine even in saving on your insurance premiums, you could almost get the investment directly back. That one question from the audience on the UK Land Registry is that did they in one way or the other audit or check your solution, or are they going to?
No, this is their position as they're not a regulator and they don't want to be for obvious reasons. So they've set out this clear set of standards, and we have effectively self-certified, if you like, that we comply with those. This is a topic that we're in conversations with the Land Registry on, because there are lots of providers out there that do lots of different things, and one of the difficult things for law firms is trying to understand which ones do meet the standard and which ones meet part of it, and it's on the roadmap or whatever it might be. But we've been working with the Land Registry for a long time on this, so have been able to kind of work towards the Read ID integration for a while now, to make sure that we tick every single one of those 4 points in a very, very kind of transparent and accurate way.
Maybe a question for Justus in this case. Was your solution audited, or in one way or the other?
Well, it was looked at in many ways.
But primarily internally, or?
Primarily internally, yeah. But we got our own audit department as well. Pen test, hack test, all the tests we did before we even started the pilot, of course. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely before we started, a lot of people from a lot of different angles looked at the total solution.
Yeah, so you really were scrutinized heavily and to go for.
Well, they should. It is the identification and verification, so it's not a bad thing. So it should be done.
Yeah, and doing things wrongly can lead to substantial penalties. That we all know. Also, given time, maybe on on your customers. And how do you're live now for roughly a month or so with the new solution? How is it accepted in the market? What is feedback by customers?
Yeah, it's been very good. As you say, we launched the NFC kind of ID standard products just under 2 months ago. In fact, uptake's been very good. We had a lot to compare it to because we've been out there with our standard ID product now for almost 2 years. So we've been very easily been able to kind of look and see the difference between the two. The user journey is much better for sure. The uptake from our law firms has been very good. The ones that understand and like the Land Registry rules, have instantly started using it, which is fantastic. So yeah, it's been really well received thus far. And overall, the volumes that we're seeing going through, the volumes that are going through our platform anyway are bigger than they've ever been. It's been a huge year of growth for us as a business. And we see almost 10% of the UK market now flowing, through our system in some way.
Wow.
So we were very, very glad that when we turned the switch on with the Read ID feature, that it could work at very big scale from the moment that we launched it.
Yeah, great. Those are figures to be proud of. Thank you very much, Jack, for joining us from the UK. I hope that in due course, for example, on Identity Week, that we'll see each other again in real life. Given time, before we close off, I would like to mention that we are, as I mentioned, indeed planning to move to real-life events again in September. You can visit us in Amsterdam at Money 2020, as well as in London at Identity Week, and in Identity we'll be joined on stage by Thirdfort as well. I'm very pleased to have that. Check out our newsletter or our website for more information. And finally, we will be present at Identify 2021 next Tuesday. It's a virtual event where Maarten Wegdam will explain in more detail on recent developments in identity verification and the role of NFC. Our partner and trust WorldReach will be there as well. Registration is free and we'll share the link with you directly after the webinar. Thanks again, Justus. Thanks again, Jack, for joining us. For now, stay secure, keep on innovating. Goodbye and tot ziens.